So the immigration debate will be a hot button issue for a long time. There's action to curb illegal entry, and now some are pushing to limit legal entry as well, because they say Americans can no longer afford the new Colossus promise, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Now, I think the idea of cutting legal immigration is a mistake, in part because America's birth rate has declined and the nation is getting older. Moreover, America has always been like the Olympics of life, where the best and the brightest have always yearned to come here and shine. I mean, take a look at Silicon Valley, for instance. More than 87 billion-dollar startups have been founded there by immigrants. But there's more, it's a more complicated issue than that, because America handsomely pays people not to work, and that's where we have a problem. You know, yesterday, a family of 5, including a young girl, worked more than 12 hours removing snow from sidewalks and driveways in my neighborhood. My wife offered them, in fact, some hot chocolate, and they came into the house, and judging from their actions, she figured they were from South America. She didn't ask if they were illegal or not. But here's the thing. There are several unemployed folks in my, on welfare in my town. And yet none of them ever bothered to chip in for a snowblower or shovels to capitalize on things like the major snowstorm. Why? Well, because they don't have to. So I like that Canadian immigration idea, a test with a series of factors like knowing the language and a potential for assimilation. But there's one thing that's not on the list that's certainly worth considering if we adopt a similar plan, and that's called grit, a desire to work. Here to discuss, Gina Loudon and Katie Frates. Gina, let me start with you. You know, this is, I know Tom Cotton is one of my favorites, but on this, I think he's wrong, cutting immigration, legal immigration, in half.
Yeah, I think one thing at a time. You know, I understand we do need to take care of business at home, and that does make a lot of sense to me. But honestly, Charles, a lot of the points that you made, I think, are quite salient. But we do have a problem. There's no doubt in this country, and you alluded to it. In many states today, you can make a lot more money being dependent on the system than you can if you work a full-time job. That's a problem. And until we get that remedied, we're going to continue to have people coming here to bilk the system. And so I like your point system. I think it's a great idea. Yeah,
Katie, I mean, listen, it's really nuts that people do make so much money off of the system and the crazy checks, the bankrupting disability. There's so many programs out there, literally 60 or so, that you can milk the taxpayer. It's got to end.
Well, of course, and I think if we're going to focus on one problematic aspect of legal immigration, that's the H-1B visa program. Of course, that is causing issues where high-skilled American laborers are being put out of work by high-skilled overseas laborers that can be paid less. But, of course, we have so many incentive programs in America that if you don't have to work and you can still go get your McDonald's and sit around all day and do whatever and be pretty darn comfortable, why would you change that? Human nature dictates that you're going to have no incentive to change if there's always a hand that's feeding you. And I think that is a huge problem. We don't have an incentive to be great. We don't have an incentive to work hard and make something better of ourselves. And until that happens, people aren't, you know, we will need those overseas workers probably that can pick up those jobs. Well,
or they'll climb walls and dig tunnels and break through them or whatever it takes. I mean, listen, the jobs are there and we're sitting on the porch letting them go begging. Hey, I want to ask you ladies about this travel moratorium that goes into effect tomorrow. Gina, you know, it feels like it should be bulletproof. We'll hear from a judge in Hawaii tonight. I don't see what the criticism is. It continues to linger, and they try to make it as a racist thing, as a religious test, and all of these other things, when it just seems to be basic, good old-fashioned common sense.
Well, I mean, let's just pull no punches here, Charles, and let's just admit what this really is. This is really about the Democrats getting people here that they believe they can manipulate to vote for them. That's really what this comes right down to. And so I think we should call it what it is, because it's not really any great mystery as to why they want them. Democrats love to separate people up into groups that they can offer something free to and convince them that they're victims. And the bottom line is, this is so insidious and bad in so many ways. Like the welfare system we were talking about before, this isn't good for the people they're doing it to either. It's downright utility in a lot of ways, and it makes them dependent. So yeah, look for them to find little anecdotal stories and make a big deal out of them. Yeah. And that'll be coming soon to the news programs near you.
There will be some heartbreaking stories of some kid in college who couldn't get back or something like that, Katie. But ultimately, I think the American public understands, considering a wave of terrorist attacks that we've had to endure in this country alone, it's smart to put this thing on pause.
Well, and of course, fighting the new executive order is part of the global economy, the global world that Obama and Merkel and Trudeau have pushed for years. The part that, we're not Americans, we're part of a global community, and they want everyone to come here because any sort of nationalism, any sort of wanting grit, wanting to work, any sort of wanting to assimilate in American culture somehow implies
hold on
that
one
other
second,
cultures...
guys. We got the news right now. A Hawaiian judge has granted a temporary restraining order on the Trump travel ban/moratorium. Katie, you called it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. They have to fight that. And I mean, of course, also Democrats need something to hold on to. They've lost everything in the federal government. They don't have power. So they got to throw punches somewhere.
Gina, real quick, I'd like your thoughts on this. This is shocking. It felt like it was bulletproof from every legal expert I spoke to on both sides of the aisle.
It completely is shocking, but this is political. Make no mistake. And your other guest is exactly right. This is about an entire effort to undermine what is uniquely American. And I don't think Americans have lost sight of that. I think that's a lot of reasons they elected Donald Trump, and I think that's the reason why Republicans will probably continue to do well.
Well, I tell you what, this is another example of judicial activism. Also, guys, I'm sorry. All right, guys, we were going to go to break, but we're not going to go to break because this is major breaking news. Again, a Hawaiian judge has granted a temporary restraining order on this new Trump executive order, which went through line by line all of the areas where they thought maybe they had made a mistake. A lot of it was inadvertent, of course, and it felt like this was something that was pretty transparent. It went from 7 to 6 countries, 90-day temporary moratorium. Want to take a look at these countries, how they're vetting their citizens, how they can improve that, how can we make sure that Americans are safe and that we don't get embedded terrorists or would-be terrorists coming in with honest-to-goodness refugees. The notion that we're not going to accept refugees in this country is counter to what made America the greatest country in the world in the very first place. The idea, though, that we should accept terrorists embedded among them, terrorists who, by the way, have admitted that they would do this, is absolutely foolhardy. Guys, we brought in Ford O'Connell to join the panel. Ford, I need your initial thoughts on this. I am really shocked. I did not think this would happen tonight. I don't know anything about the law, but I did think common sense would prevail.
Well, you have to understand something here. Your common sense is not common when it comes to the Ninth Circuit. You're talking about one of the most Democratic progressive circuit of the 13 federal circuits, and it was clear that they were going to come down hard on this. They came down on it before, and I'm going to tell you something. This has nothing to do with the law. We have to stop thinking of our judges in the federal circuit courts as independent people when we know that they're political appointees who are trying to carry out an agenda. To me, this is not shocking. If I'm the Trump administration, what I would have done is trying to go victim shopping myself and find someone in the Fifth Circuit who would actually have this sort of hearing, have this sort of question, and then rule in their actual favor. So this is not shocking to me. This is what the Democrats are hoping for, and they're hoping that they can use it at the ballot box in 2018.
You know, Katie, it's interesting in the sense that these activist judges, we talk about draining the swamp, and it's already proving that it's going to be a tough, difficult task with embedded bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. But maybe an even larger, more murkier swamp are these activist judges. Many of them who have just changed what they were given the jobs to do in the first place. They have no shame these days.
Well, of course, when it comes to, it's no longer upholding the law. It is upholding what whoever appointed you wants to do. That's the big issue. And I think one of the biggest things we can do right now, of course, is get Neil Gorsuch through the Senate. Get him onto the Supreme Court. Get it back to people who appreciate the Constitution and what it stands for.
We have Josh Blackmun, guys. He's on the phone with us, a law professor. He's helped us. He's walked us through this before. Josh, first of all, I want your initial assessment. A Hawaiian judge granting this temporary restraining order. Did you think that this was a bulletproof revision to the executive order?
I think the Hawaii District Court's decision is severely flawed because it assumes that because of statements that President Trump has made over the past number of years, that this policy is forever tainted. And that's simply not what the case law says. The fact of the matter is we have a situation where the president had one order, the court invalidated it, and then we have the second order that tried to remedy it. What the court's basically saying is that nothing Trump could ever do can remove this taint. And that's simply not what the case law provides.
Josh, I'm going to read to you from the judge, Derek Watson, what he said. The key statement from him is enforcement of these provisions in all places, including the United States, at all United States borders and ports of entry, and then the issuance of visas is prohibited pending further orders from this court. So you are surprised that this was the decision. And so we're back to where we were before, the speculation on what happens now. Where does the White House go with this? If they can't use the court system as it's set up, do they dare go to the Supreme Court with the current balance?
The government's in a tough spot right now, but they're prepared for it. They are, as we speak, I have no doubt they're planning an appeal to the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. That's the same court that ruled for the challengers a few weeks ago. After that, they may decide to go to the Supreme Court again. I can tell you the judge in Seattle a few minutes ago ruled that this order was different than the first order. So I think there's a pretty credible case that they get the injunction stayed by the Supreme Court. But this is not unexpected. There was a fairly good chance at least one court would rule against them. There were 3 courts today that were considering this exact same issue.
I did not hear that from anyone that they thought that perhaps that this would be the outcome, again, because they had gone through this and they saw where all of the issues were, anything that could be even remotely problematic, and it felt like they addressed all of them here. I want to bring back Shah Gilani because Shah, there's an economic aspect to this as well. And some of that was actually argued, I think, in some of these cases. I know they were all sort of slightly different. What do you make of this with respect to the economy? I mean, do you think this will impact Wall Street at all tomorrow?
I think it will. Simply what it does is politicizes judgeships around the United States. I mean, the judiciary should be separate in the United States, and it's empowered to be separate. But the politicization of judges around this country has been, the pendulum has swung too far. And what this is going to do is going to give the Democrats further power to push back against everything the Republicans are going to do, including the president's agenda on tax reform, on stimulus, on everything that he's pushing. It just empowers them.
All right, guys, once again, I want to read to the audience what the judge had to say. Judge Derek Watson in Hawaii, enforcement of these provisions in all places, including the United States, at all U.S. borders and port of entry, and the issuance of visas is prohibited, pending further orders from this court. We're going to leave it there. Lou Dobbs has a 2-hour special, Donald Trump taking his case for health care reform to Tennessee. It's next.